Okay, the recording is set, and you guys are ready to roll whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Scott Schumacher, and I'm the principal at St. Peter's Lutheran School in Columbus, Indiana. And I have the privilege of introducing today's webinar, Rocks, Blocks, Birds, and Buildings, the Project Approach in Primary Grades. Today's webinar will feature a best practice at Faith Lutheran School in Lincoln, Nebraska. This webinar was prepared by our friends at Faith Lincoln and is being produced by Concordia University, Wisconsin's Office of Continuing and Distance Education. We thank our friends at Concordia for their leadership and support in this endeavor. I have just a few notes before we begin our webinar today. There are 2 additional webinars scheduled this month for Faith Lincoln. Next Tuesday on February 18th, the staff at Faith Lincoln will present on building a flexible preschool. And then on February 25th, the staff will present on Leave the Paper on the Shelf, a 21st century approach to music education. And please note that this webinar on the 25th was originally scheduled for February 4th, but it was rescheduled for the 25th due to an illness of the presenter. So we hope everybody's feeling better for the presentation on the 25th. All the webinars this month have been prepared by our friends at Faith Lincoln and represent best practices currently in place at their school. Congratulations again on being selected as an exemplary school in our Synod. Live webinars are participatory events, and so we appreciate your questions and comments. Please feel free to express yourself by typing in the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. All the webinars presented this year are available on demand on the login page of the Lutheran School portal. You need not be a portal member to view them. If you like what was shared, we invite you to view a recorded webinar together with your faculty. This is a great opportunity for professional development. Another great resource of Lutheran schools is the LCMS School Ministry Facebook page. Our Facebook page provides another opportunity for our school to connect informally. We invite you to share your encouraging stories on the LCMS School Ministry Facebook page. Now let's begin our webinar today with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we acknowledge you as our Savior and King and give you thanks for the opportunity to serve you in our various schools. We thank you for all Lutheran schools, but especially give you thanks today for Faith Lutheran School in Lincoln, Nebraska. We thank you for blessing this school with a fantastic staff who work hard to draw children and their families into a close relationship with our Savior, Jesus Christ. We ask that you would continue to shower your blessings upon Faith Lutheran School. Give the staff at Faith all that they need to teach the students entrusted to their care. And finally, Lord, we ask that you be with those who are presenting this webinar today, as well as those who are participating in this webinar. May this next hour be a blessing to all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We welcome Judy Ripke from Faith Lutheran School in Lincoln, Nebraska, as she presents on Rocks, Blocks, Birds, and Buildings, the Project Approach in Primary Grades.
Thank you, Tom. I'm happy to be doing this today. I would like to give you first just a little background on myself so you know why I am excited about project work in the primary grades. I have taught all ages from 3-year-olds through 2nd grade, and I have done project work with kindergartners, 1st graders, and 2nd graders. And one of the reasons I'm excited to share with you is not only because it gets children very excited about learning, but it has changed me as a teacher as well. It's changed my view of children from being passive vessels who are sitting and waiting for information to a view of children as powerful learners who are gifted by God to discover his world, always wondering, questioning, and eager to learn about all that he has created. So that is why I am excited to share with you today. First of all, before we get into what a project is, all the photos in this PowerPoint are from my classroom over the past 4.5 years of 1st grade classroom. So first of all, to define what is a project, it's an in-depth investigation of a topic worth learning more about. And this definition comes from Lillian Katz, who's been a leader in project work with young children for quite a long time. She's a co-author of the book Young Investigators, now in its 2nd edition, which will be listed at the end of this PowerPoint. Project work focuses on finding answers to questions that are posed by the children. And those of you that have worked with young children know just that alone, helping them know the difference between a question and a comment, is a major thing. But in addition, I want them to learn how to ask questions in a world that is filled with rapidly multiplying and changing information. I feel like I am equipping children for the future when I teach them to formulate questions and to find out where to go and how to find their answers. And also, as they find answers to their questions, to be discerning about the sources of information that they are getting them from. At this time of the year in my classroom, if a child says, I know something, another child will respond by saying, what is your source and how do you know that? And I will welcome your questions as well, but I plan to answer those at the end. I will be very happy to answer them. Some of the benefits of project work are that it applies tools from curricular areas to find the answers to questions that the children are asking. For example, in the morning, we are doing what you would be doing, math and reading and Jesus time and writing. And then in project time, we're applying those things to find our answers. We're reading so that we can find answers. We're doing math so that we can do experiments to find our answers. So it shows the children the purpose of what they are learning. As we said before, it teaches children to ask questions and where to find answers. We do a lot of work in cooperative groups, and this too is a learning process for young children who are more focused on themselves, but are learning to work with others. It develops positive dispositions toward learning, and I think sometimes we get so caught up in the academics that we forget that it's important to develop these positive dispositions, that children are excited to learn, that they believe in themselves as competent learners, that they can go and solve problems and answer questions, that they have the capability of doing that. It's not just learning information, but it's developing positive attitudes about themselves and about learning. We involve families very much in their child's learning when we are doing projects. When children are excited about what they're doing at school and what they're learning, they take that home and they talk about it, and that creates excitement with the parents. I always put that in our newsletter, that this is what's coming up and that children are free to bring information in. We find out all kinds of things and all kinds of expertise in families that we didn't even know was there as children bring in things from home. And finally, project work allows us to integrate the curriculum, using the math, the reading, the writing skills that they have learned in other areas and applying them to project work. I also bring in art, music, and other connections to Jesus time during the work of a project. Project work prepares children, too, to be 21st century learners. We get many connections with our students, especially to their local community, as we find out what parents are doing in our communities, as we find out what other workers in our community are doing to help our community run smoothly and to help everything work together. Project work fosters what researchers call essential 21st century skills, including critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and creativity. We use critical thinking as we look at the sources of information, as we discuss with each other, do you think that's what we really have seen? Is that what our research shows? Is that what our experiment shows? We do problem solving as children have to find the ways to find the answers to their questions. We discuss collaboration, and creativity comes into play very much when we get to the end of our project and we are ready to show others what we have learned. And project work provides opportunities to integrate technology, and this is not technology for technology's sake, but technology that helps us expand and share our learning with others. Project work occurs in 3 phases. The first phase being choosing of the topic and finding out what the questions are. The second phase is doing the investigation, really getting into the project work. And the third phase is sharing what we have learned. In phase one, it is critical to choose a good topic. Often my topics emerge from children's interests, and sometimes that sounds frightening to teachers that it would be emergent curriculum, but I honestly cannot tell parents, and I tell them this from year to year, what we will be studying in project time. Because I listen to the things that children are talking about and asking about and pick our topics from those. To give you one example of that, early this year, we were laying some new sidewalks at our school. We had cement mixers coming in. We had people smoothing the concrete. We had children from my class over there just totally focused on this concrete work. So we came back together later, and I said, you seemed really interested in that. Would you like to learn more about how concrete is made and how concrete is used? And from that, we went into a concrete project. But topics for projects do not have to come only through an emergent route. Those topics could be initiated by the teacher as well, who may be looking at, well, this is my first grade curriculum, and we're supposed to study plants. Oh, I'm going to do plants from a project approach instead of from just reading through their book. As you're planning the topic and thinking about it, there are some anticipatory considerations. Not every topic is worthy. Children may be talking about Halloween a lot in October, but that doesn't make it a good topic for study. Also, as I look at my topic, I kind of plan out, am I going to be able to connect to some of my state standards or to Common Core goals? Do I have the resources? Do I have books? Do I have experts in the community that I can connect to? Is there a possibility of some field sites we could go and visit? So all that comes into play before I commit to saying to the children, is this what you want to do? Let's go for it. If the teacher decides to initiate the project from her own topic, such as plants, it's important to get a focus experience for the children first, so they all have some common background. We can't ask questions about things we know nothing about, so we need some common background and some knowledge to ask those questions. So with the plants, maybe it means bringing in to the classroom. Maybe it means starting rooting some, just so I get the children interested and talking about it and starting to wonder. Finally, we want to know, is the topic of high interest to the children? Is it practical and meeting our curriculum goals? If we can say yes to those things and the children are excited, we are ready to begin our project. I am showing you a couple things that we do in phase one. This is a chart of what children know. You could do a KWL chart as well. But with this chart at the beginning, we were doing a project on earthworms, and the children were telling me what they knew already about earthworms. And I wrote each of those things on a sticky note and put them on this chart. When we got to the end of our project on earthworms, I asked them to go through with me and see if they had changed their minds about anything now that they had studied so much. And all of the sticky notes at the bottom are things that they said were no longer true. One of the things that moved from the top to the bottom was that if an earthworm got cut in half, it would make 2 new worms. And we learned that cutting an earthworm in half would kill it, not create 2 new worms. And the first graders now are kind of on a mission to share that with people, that you don't want to cut earthworms in half, and you should be careful when you're digging stuff. This chart, which looks pretty messy, is a list of our questions at the beginning of the earthworm project, but it is a working document that we keep returning to and using throughout the project. So the initial questions were in blue, And as we come back to see have we answered them, we write in our answers to the ones that we know. And new questions emerge, and you see those questions in black that emerged during the project. So it's messy because it's a working document that we continue to use throughout the project. The questions are guiding where we're going with the project. Once we've established those questions and I've talked with the children about where we might find answers, we delve into the project in phase 2. My responsibility includes bringing in books, magazines, objects, things that will enable children to investigate. If we're studying about rocks, I'm going to have books, magazines, and I'm going to have rocks, and I'm going to have magnifying glasses, and all kinds of things like that out for the children to actually do investigation. I want to prepare for fieldwork sites and expert visitors. I always feel like I have to be a little cautious with experts coming in and explain to them about the attention span of young children, and also that young children respond better to things that they can show versus just talking to them. If we're going to make a site visit, I want to do the same thing. I want to go there first and see will they actually let us ask questions. We're not coming because we've studied this and we're done. We're coming because we have questions and we're hoping to find answers while we're there. During this phase, I continually have the children record their learning in project journals, which I will share with you. And children are making representations throughout to show what they're learning. There is a book based on the work of Reggio Emilia and others doing project-type work called The 100 Languages of Children. And it just reminds us that children show us in many ways, not just writing, what they are learning. So it could be their drawings, it could be things that they create, it could be their art. And as mentioned before, we continually revisit our questions. Here you see part of phase 2, the reading research. And although the student on the left is doing the research on their own, which is fine, often children do well working with a partner, especially if one is a stronger reader or if one has a better understanding of interpreting what's in the book. They work together to find out things that will answer our questions. Obviously, if it lends itself well, we want to have artifacts from that in our classroom. Having done 2 projects this year, one on concrete and one on worms, we still have a core of concrete from a highway in Nebraska sitting in our room. We still have a live earthworm tub or habitat in our room, but those artifacts need to be there for the children to have hands-on investigation. We also do experimenting during our project investigations. We see pictures here from 3 different projects. The picture in the upper left is part of our earthworm study. We use the scientific method to do experiments to find out if our worms preferred dark, if they preferred water. The children got very much into that, and by the end, when I said, well, this didn't come out quite the way we thought, what should we do? They said, we need more trials. So they understood how that applied because they were doing it. In the bottom left corner, these children are working on a water project. That project emerged last year after Lincoln had been in kind of a drought and had water restrictions. So children were really asking a lot about where does our water come from and how do we know if we'll have enough? And what they are working on in that photo is trying to find out what is the job of a water tower and how does the water tower help to get water into our home. The picture on the right comes from a project on bridges that we did, and they're experimenting with building bridges, how big the span can be and how much it can support. We want hands-on investigation where children are actually dealing with the materials. These 2 photos are from our concrete project. And as I said, if you send the message home to parents that this is what we're going to work on, they come back to you with all kinds of ideas. This man in the upper left photo is a father. And as soon as he heard we were doing a concrete project, he came to me and he said, well, I work with the roads and I'd like to come in and show the children some pictures about that. And if you're open to it, I'd be willing to make concrete with them. Open to it. I was thrilled. So that is him actually showing us how we mix the concrete. And then in the lower right hand, the children are making their own stepping stones with that concrete that he showed us how to make. One way to find answers to our questions in a project is to ask an expert. On the upper left, you see that same father. He's sharing some photos of work that they do on the roads with concrete. In the lower left corner, that was in our water project as well. And this is a mom of one of the students in our classroom, and her husband is a professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln who works with water engineering. And he had made this model of how a water tower works and how it would get water into a home, into the sinks, into the bathtubs, and yes, even into the toilet, which was important to them, to the children. In the upper right-hand corner, this father was a civil engineer that works for the Department of Transportation here in Nebraska, and he is sharing with us how bridges were built. That was part of our bridge project. In the lower right-hand corner, this mom is sharing with us during our concrete project, and our concrete project started with how is concrete made and kind of bent toward the direction of where is concrete used. So we were studying a lot of architectural features like columns and domes and things like that that could be made from concrete. So I sent home a request if anyone knew an architect or someone who could come and talk to us about how buildings are made. This mom came and she was 7 tests away from being an architect, and I said, that's good enough for us. So she shared with us a lot about how they determine where concrete will be used in buildings. Another time, the expert may be someone who is outside of our school family. It's really exciting, and I think the best if it is someone in our school family, but they don't always have expertise in the areas we're learning about. On the left is a man from the Lincoln Water Department who came to our school to talk to us about water in the water project and how it gets to our homes. And his suggestion was that we go down in our building and find where the water came into our school building. This was new for me as well as for the children, and it was wonderful to have him explain how that all worked. We learned a lot of answers to our questions from that. In the lower right, this is a trip to Home Depot that we did during our concrete project and seeing how concrete is used in buildings. And you might notice that all the children are holding what we call a clipboard, which is just a piece of corrugated cardboard to which we attach a piece of paper with a paper clip because it is their responsibility to be writing down answers to our questions while we are there. Sometimes the site visits occur very close or right within our campus. When we were doing a bridge project, this is a bridge on the left that is part of our school property. And so we went there and could see right up close where the piers were, where the girders were, where the decking is. And wonderfully, to raise the next question, right as we were watching, a FedEx truck drove over the bridge, and I said, now you've been making bridges, and when you put things on them, they move. Did you see that bridge move when the FedEx truck went over? Well, they didn't, so we had to go back and find out how could we make our bridges more sturdy. The picture on the right occurred during our concrete project, and they were constructing a home across the street from our school building. And we saw all of these cement mixers going by, so naturally we said, what's going on? And we went to the very edge of our sidewalk and watched as they were pouring foundation for these homes. it was exciting because that was one of the things that we had wanted to learn about, was how do they make a foundation. And we could see the forms, and we could see the men tamping down the concrete into those forms right across the street from our school. I feel like God kind of opens windows for us every time we're doing a project and finds more ways for us to find answers for the children. These are more site visits. The photo on the left is a grandparent of one of the students at our school. This was during a rock project, and they own a rock shop here in Lincoln. She was a wonderful resource, both her and her husband, for answering a lot of the questions that we have, and they were very willing to let the children touch the things and send them back with a bunch of rocks that they could keep. On the right, this is a picture from our Home Depot field trip, and because, of course, we had questions about concrete that I had told them we would be asking before we came, one of the things that he showed us was a cement mixer that you could buy and use at your own home. It's very important during a project to me that children keep a written record. We talk about how researchers and scientists are always writing down and keeping a record of what they are learning. The children on the left are on the bridge project, and again you see the clipboard that they have there. The child on the right is writing in a project journal. Whatever project we are working on, we always have a project journal for entering things that we're learning, or questions that we have, drawings. And here is a picture of what one of those looks like. On the right, top right, you see what the pages are. There's a space for drawing and a space for writing. And our project journals have those same pages every time. All we do is change the outside cover to fit whatever our current project is. And we just talk about it is very important, if you are a researcher, that you are recording the research that you have found. I try to bring in cross-curricular connections during every project. This was during our rock project, and the art of Andy Goldsworthy, who did a book called Stones, really was inspiring to the children, and even though it wasn't directly an answer to a question that they had asked, I felt like it had a direct tie-in with that. Anyway, Andy Goldsworthy makes these rock creations where he balances rocks in amazing ways, takes photographs of them, and then destroys them. So the children wanted to make their own rock sculptures, and these are a couple of those. When we were doing the bridge project, we took a look at Monet's bridge paintings and work, and so we talked about how light, he looked at how light would reflect off his bridges, or how his bridge would look at different times of the day. These are some of the paintings that children did of his bridge. Some of them also chose to do paintings of the bridge that was on our property, taking into account what the lighting was at different times of day. We come to phase 3 when you kind of get the sense that the children have answered most of their questions. They're not talking about it as much anymore. They're not as excited about it anymore. It's time to wrap it up. And so I come to the children and I say to them, how are we going to show our learning? So these are some things that we think about as we're entering phase 3. First of all, we go to our initial questions and the questions that we have added. Have we answered those, or have we answered most of them? Sometimes there are questions we can't find the answers to. We will make a chart or a web of what we have learned. We talk about how are we going to share this with other people? How are they going to know all that we have learned about? And then we plan what that final project or event will be that we share our learning. As a teacher, I'm assessing what those anticipatory goals that I made at the beginning, have we met those goals? Have we met those standards that I wanted to meet? Here is a web that we did at the end of our worm project. And I found out that when I put these out in the hall for parents and others to see, I have to put a sign that says, these are the words that the children said. The first time that I did a project here and I put one of these webs out in the hall, I had a parent come and say, oh, that's nice, all the stuff that you put up out there about bridges, which was our current topic. I had to say, no, that's not what I put out there. That's what the children are saying. That's what the children have learned. Another way to compare children's learning is to do a web at the beginning of the project of what they know, and then do a web at the end. Usually the learning is phenomenal, and you will see huge changes in that web. This was the culminating event that the children chose for their worm project. They really were passionate about trying to teach others what they had learned about taking care of worms, and that worms weren't yucky, and that they were really important in God's world and in helping plants grow and keeping things in an ecological order. And initially, they wanted to put posters all over the school, but I, as a teacher, still have the right to give this a little direction. So I stepped in and I said, how about we put them outside of our classroom and invite people to come and see them? So they did this in groups of 3 or 4. The poster on the upper left talks about the anatomy of an earthworm. The poster on the upper right, as you can see, the circles with the lines through, is telling you some things that you should not do or think about worms. The poster on the lower left is showing a worm environment, and the poster on the right talks about foods that worms will eat. This is the culminating activity for our construction project. The children said, we want to make our own buildings. We want to show where concrete is used in buildings. And then I said, how are you going to make these buildings? And they said, well, we could use boxes. So we brought in all kinds of boxes. And they worked on these in partners. So partners had to plan. That's what you see on the left. They're planning what their project is going to look like and where they will include the concrete. And then you see them working on it. Now, the children also said we should make a movie. So this is what I found that worked really well. And instead of being just a movie where they have to hold their building and talk about it at the same time, there is a shadow puppet app where we can take photographs of them with their building, and then they can come back later and actually look at what they're holding and tell us about it. So I would like to share with you that shadow puppet app right now that we did on our concrete project. Do I need to do something to make this begin? I think it's going.
Go.
This is Mari.
This is Tommy. Here.
This is a hotel. These are windows made of concrete.
The building is made of concrete. The whole building is made of concrete.
This is Hannah. This is what we learned about concrete. How to make concrete. Water, aggregate, cement, and sand. This is Harper. This is our project. To make concrete. Yeah. That's just this part. This is Brandon. We built a skyscraper. This is Isabella. We built for our concrete blocks. Ethan, the footings are made of concrete and the foundations are made of concrete. This is Caleb. It is a house. Our concrete and the door. This is Thomas. This is a church, and this is concrete block, and this is stained glass mountain. This is Cody. This is a church, and this is a pyramid shape, and this is a stained glass mountain. This is Jacob. We have concrete. We have a window. We have cement.
Okay, we've come to the end of that. I do want to share with you that one thing that I felt was not user-friendly with the Shadow Puppet app when we used it is that when you record, if you wanted to go back, and two of the girls had said, can we start over? You couldn't without going all the way back to the beginning and recording everything again. But I'm happy to say I have talked to someone at the, I don't know, who's in charge of the Shadow Puppet thing, and she has told me they have already changed that so that you can go back and just record over just one part without erasing everything before. So now I think it's a very user-friendly app, and it's really good for this age of children so that we can kind of separate the action from the talking and give more thought into what we're going to say. This is another culminating activity that we have used. These are photos from our first grade rock museum. This was at the end of our study of rocks. We have also done a museum after the study of shells. And initially, I have to say that making a museum is not what children thought of that first year. So I kind of suggested that to them, and I said, you want to think about this a little bit? And they decided they wanted to do a museum. The next year, I didn't have to suggest that. The children then had seen that from the year before, and they said, we want to do the same thing. I did have to do a couple virtual field trips of a museum a little bit because not all of the children had experience with museums. So I wanted them to see how they create the exhibits in museums and how they put up signs that describe what they're seeing so that they would know what it is that we were trying to create for our museum. In these pictures, you see them painting the backgrounds for different exhibits in the museum. And this was done in cooperative groups of 4. And those children picked what they were going to be presenting, then made the background for that, decided what rocks could go in it, decided what words needed to be put by that, and then when the museum was open, they would stand there and give further information to people who were visiting. This shows some visitors coming to our rock museum. We invited all the classes in the school to come. We did this over 2 days, and these are different children visiting. What's really powerful for my first graders, if you know, you never learn something as well as when you teach it. And so they were standing there teaching the people who had come to our museum about what they had learned about rock. The exhibit on the lower right, they planned to show things that were made of rock, so we have jewelry and different things in there that were important to them. This is another picture of our rock. This is when we invited parents, grandparents, family, friends to come. And the way that we made this happen was I kept the Rock Museum open after school till 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock being the time that our after-school care closes, so that parents, when they would come to pick up their children, could also come with their child to the Rock Museum. And in this circumstance, the child had to go through the whole museum with their parent and explain all of the exhibits. I got to do this repeatedly, so I feel like it really cemented the learning that we had done about rock. I'd like to kind of show you through all 3 phases, step by step, how we go through a project. And this is step by step through the bridge project that we did the first year that I was here teaching first grade. The topic came up from this question. We were talking about a country far away, actually China, and to give children a perspective on how far away it was, I said the only way you could get there would be to take a boat or to fly there. And some of the children said, why couldn't you just build a bridge to get there? Let's build a bridge to get there. Instead of turning around and saying to the children, no, that won't work. You can't make bridges that big. I thought, what a great thing for them to investigate. So for a focused activity, I said, would you like me to bring a book tomorrow about bridges? And they said yes. So we read this book, Bridges Are to Cross, which shows different bridges around the world. And even as we were reading, great questions were emerging. Some of the things that the children were asking was, how do they get those things, which we later learned were called piers, down into the water? How does the drawbridge know when it should go up? How does a suspension bridge work? Great questions, and we were ready to go. Initially, we started by building bridges in our classroom. Some of the children were using materials and toys that were already in there. Some others were constructing bridges, and we were saying, how can you test the weight? How can you see how much it will hold? At this point, I did not give the children any hints or clues about how to make their bridges stronger. I let them work on that. Of course, we shared what we were learning with parents, and children started to bring in photos of bridges and models of bridges that they had made at home. If they went on a trip and they saw a bridge, parents were taking pictures so we could bring those bridge pictures in. And then I found out that we had a father who could come and talk to us about bridges, a civil engineer, and he works for the Nebraska Department of Transportation. He did an awesome job for our class, and not only did the children learn, I learned a lot about bridges. He talked about what he had to wear. Then he showed us that first they put up the piers to make the bridge. Then you put on girders, and finally a deck. Very concrete way of showing the children, and the first graders were very engrossed in what he had to say. Let me go back for a minute before we talk about this field site visit. After he had shown us how that bridge was done, he showed us a wonderful PowerPoint he had made of how they built the bridge on I-80 that goes across the Platte River. And that is when we learned how they put those piers down into the river when there's all that water around. And we know that you can't pour concrete into water. It was very engaging. Then we visited the bridge at the edge of our property, which you have seen some photos of before. And of course, the children are recording what they're seeing on their clipboard. Then we went back to experiment more with bridge building. If you remember the FedEx truck and what can we do to make our bridges more sturdy, at this point I came in and told the children, something that I read that we could try is bending up the edges to make our cardboard or cardstock that we're using stronger. And so then they started trying that, and we were using at this point pennies to see how much we could put on there. Obviously, we're going to be using a lot of math as we talk about how big is your span, how many pennies can it hold. We're counting to pretty big numbers with those pennies. You also notice that by this point in time, the children had learned reducing your span is also a way to make your bridge stronger. Some children continued to use the animal counters, but you see now we are bending the edges. We found out that really helped to make our bridges stronger. I put this little boy in here because he, when everyone else was kind of done with the bridges, he still was just totally engrossed in learning about bridges. He was fascinated with suspension bridges, and he asked if he could keep working on his bridge. So we kind of put this into the corner of our classroom, and he continued working on that for several weeks after we were really finished with our bridge project. This is where we brought in the art, as I mentioned earlier. We looked at Monet's bridge, but we also looked at some photographs that people had done of bridges artistically. And the bridge on the bottom lent itself very well to the book of the Little Gray Lighthouse, or the Little Red Lighthouse, and the Great Gray Bridge. When we got done with our bridge project, this is what children said that they had learned. This is the web that they had made. Kinds of bridges, famous bridges. How do you make it stronger? Parts of a bridge. What are all the things that you need to make a bridge? This is the one that I put out in the hall and had a parent say, oh, that's nice, all the things you told us about bridges. I'm going to kind of sum up for you what we learned through this project in different curricular areas, even though they were all integrated into the project. We learned about what is the job of a civil engineer. We learned about the location of many bridges in our community. All of a sudden, children were looking. When I go home, do I cross any bridges? When I go see my grandma, do I cross any bridges? We learned about the importance of safety of bridges and how engineers make sure that our bridges are safe. We learned about how important bridges are to help move cars and people around in our community. And then again, due to that book about the Little Red Lighthouse and the Great Gray Bridge, lights need to be on tall bridges to help air traffic. In Science, we learned the bridge stronger. We learned about what supports a regular bridge or what supports a suspension bridge, and what happens if your bridge isn't strong enough to support the weight that's going. In literacy, we increased our vocabulary. Some of the words there, pier, deck, girder, span, cable. Always we're writing. We write together questions. We write together what we have learned, but children are also doing their own writing as they're recording information on their clipboards and in their journals. And then you see some of the books that we used as we were studying bridges. In math, we were learning to count a large number. We were learning how you measure or even height, how you measure span, how you compare quantities of objects, how I can't use animal counters and you use pennies, and we can say that we compare and that my bridge holds more than yours. Comparing weight. In art, we learned about the use of line. We learned about Monet's work as an Impressionist painter and how he used light in his art. We learned that artists can use different mediums to show bridges, and that you can make pictures of bridges at different times of day or in different seasons, and they will look differently. Our culminating project for this bridge project was that the children did line drawings of bridges, and then they described to me what their picture was showing, and I typed that up and put that in the corner of their bridge work. So these are some of the children's work, and these are some others. And the one in the upper left corner, yes, was drawn by a first grader. Impressive enough that even children from fifth grade would come by and say, I can't draw like that. Very attentive to detail. So that takes you through a project and shows you the phases of the project. These are some sources that I highly recommend if you are interested in project work in the early years. Young investigators I referred to earlier. The project approach in the early years is kind of almost like a guide and even has a journal in the back to take you step by step through it. It talks about project work with children as young as toddlers and all the way through 6 and 7. The next two books on the project approach are by Sylvia Chard, another important name in project work with young children. Although these project books are older, they are very specific on how to do project work in the primary grade. And the first website that is given there is Sylvia Chard's website. And she has a lot of things on there that you can download, but also if you would be interested in purchasing either of those two books, you can buy them through that website. The last website is William Katz's website on project work. There's a lot of project work done with young children in Illinois, and they give you examples of projects that can be done with children at different ages in the early years. That is the end of my PowerPoint, and at this point I would like to address some of the questions. Scott, you asked about charging for particular projects. I have never had to charge for any project. The one that maybe would have cost something is the earthworm, but all first grade teachers in Lincoln are sent a letter at the beginning of the year from our Natural Resources District that says if you want earthworms in your classroom this year, let us know, and we will give you a certificate to get free worms. So I know that as I'm doing my anticipatory planning about earthworms, I know that's a resource that I have. That's something that I can do. So I've never had to charge for anything. I do, as a teacher, often buy books related to the project, but that's just what I would do. Does the project approach continue into elementary school and middle school? My specialty, of course, is young children and in the early years, but absolutely project work, or what's often called inquiry-based learning, can continue all the way through high school and beyond. I do have a book that is not with me that I'd be happy to share with you that discusses project work on all those different levels and how much deeper the children go when they're asking their own questions and trying to find the answers to those. So absolutely, inquiry-based learning can continue beyond that.
Judy, just want to let you know that at this time everyone is unmuted, so they can, those in the webinar can feel free to just ask questions. I have one more question here for you, Judy.
Okay.
Just real quickly, as you expand this project learning to the older grades, those older grade teachers need to buy into the program. Was that a struggle to get them to buy in, or did they really jump on board pretty quickly?
Well, not all of our teachers are doing project work, but we are doing quite a bit in the early years. They do it in kindergarten. The third grade teacher is as well. And of course, as you get into the older grades, the topic is often done from what the teacher says. I can give you a very quick example of one that I read on the high school level. They were studying the Constitution, and the assignment to students was that they would find something in the Constitution that applied today, and that they should research how that piece of the Constitution was being applied. The example that was given in the book were two girls that studied immigration in light of the Constitution and showed a just tremendous flow chart that they had made of all the processes that one has to go through if they want to be a legal immigrant in the United States. So that's why I say with all certainty that this definitely can be done at other levels.
Right. I agree completely. Thank you.
Any more questions that I can answer?
We'll just wait just a little bit here, give everybody a chance to kind of, sort through any questions they have. And if you don't want to speak in the webinar, you can certainly type your question in the lower right-hand corner as well. Tom just prompted you to do that. Either way works. I'll give you a few more minutes to do that.
I also would like to say I'm sorry I did not put my email in this, but I would love to be in discussion with other teachers who are doing project work. Again, borrowing from the Reggio Emilia approach, where they do some project work, they have their teachers collaborating all the time on what they're learning from the children and how they can make their projects even richer. So I would welcome that very much. Parents, Terry, I see what you have said, and absolutely parents are very excited about this. Like I said, as soon as the note goes home, they are on board. And I have to say, once you start building that history of doing projects, then they're asking, what are you going to do this year? Are you going to do this year? One of the home visits that I went on this year, the mother told me I was having a sibling of a child I had before. And he had said to the sibling, oh, you're going to love it in Mrs. Ripke's class because you get to study what you want. So referring to projects. But parents are very excited about projects. And thank you for happy parents are our best marketers, absolutely.
Judy, do you have a set repertoire of projects that you do every year, or do you rotate that around, or how does that work for you?
Every year is an open book. I start the year with no commitment to any project because I do it from the emergent approach. So I am listening to children. And even though I knew I had those earthworms as a resource, I do not do the worms every year. This year I did it because children were taking worms and throwing them in the water and saying they loved it. And knowing that is not what earthworms love, and maybe we need to learn something here. That's why I went into that this year. So no, I do not have a set agenda ahead of time. and I pick those projects as we go through the year. But I do want to say once again that it does not have to be done from an emergent approach. Those topics can be picked from your curriculum or things that you believe need to be covered in your grade level. It's just taking it from the children's questions instead of going through a teacher's guide.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, I see your question. How does this fit into the daily schedule? We save about the last hour of the day for project work. And to be honest with you, I don't always use that for project work. Sometimes it's something that we have to do for art or a scholastic news. But most of the time, that is our project time. I do not have a separate social studies and science time. That is included in our project work. And so you'll see in the schedule, Jesus time, reading, writing, math, and then project time at the end of the day. At the beginning of the year, regarding parent involvement, when I go on home visits, I talk to parents about how we will be doing projects, about how we will find answers to our questions and topics, and I talk to them and say, we will want to get you involved. And I ask for parents to share with me what they're doing in their profession, if that's something that we could do. But often it doesn't even come out of that. It comes more from when I send the topic home to parents, then parents say, oh, I've got that, or I could talk about that, or I could do that. But I do tell parents on home visits that we will be doing project work and what that will look like.
Looks like there may be another question or two coming. We'll just wait a few more minutes here if anybody else has any final questions.
While you're typing, if I can just share with you, thank you for letting me share with you today about project work. I am very excited about this kind of work with children, and as I said earlier, it has completely changed my view of children and what powerful learners they are. God has really blessed them with many avenues for learning about His world.
As someone else is typing a question, Judy, one thing I would encourage you to present this at the conference if you haven't done so already. This is a really good stuff that I think is very practical that can be implemented in really any Lutheran school, which is kind of one of those things about being an exemplary school, you know, those replicable practices, and this one is certainly that. So great job on that. I encourage you to keep presenting.
Thank you very much. And I will share that I am presenting this at the Early Childhood Conference at Concordia University in Nebraska this summer. So a little bit there. But I'm just very excited about project work with young children.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Sarah.
Looks like we were all thinking the same thing at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Well, are there any final questions that anybody has for Judy today? If not, we certainly thank Judy from Faith Lutheran in Lincoln, Nebraska for your presentation. You did a fantastic job in the presentation, and certainly this project learning is indeed a best practice. So great job with all of that. We also thank Tom Davila from Concordia, Wisconsin for helping to produce this webinar. We certainly couldn't do all these webinars without his help, so thank you, Tom, for all that you do. And again, we certainly pray God's blessings upon all of you as you continue to serve our Savior as professional educators in Lutheran schools. And one last reminder, don't forget that next Tuesday, February 18th, Faith Lutheran in Lincoln, Nebraska will present their second webinar, Building a Flexible Preschool Child Care Ministry. God's blessings to you all, and have a fantastic evening.
Thank you.